Name?
William R. Brown, Jr.
Okay. And during your time in the 10th, your highest ranks achieved and the unit that you served with in the 10th?
I was first sergeant of Company L in the 86th Regiment.
Well, how about for some warm-ups? How about if you just tell me a little bit about how you came to be in the 10th? I understood you were a paratrooper / skier before that.
Right. When I used to put up with him, God almighty, he was something else.
What was he? What was he like?
Oh, yeah. Well, of course, he was a captain. Well, first, he came in there out of Dartmouth. I had went through basic training and was teaching basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. So he was a raw first lieutenant.
Okay.
He was a raw first lieutenant.
Oh, so you actually had a hand in molding him.
Oh, sure. Oh, he was a little young first lieutenant. And then he was promoted to captain when he went up to division headquarters.
Well, I can see nobody's probably gonna.
Ready now,
Okay.
believe it or not.
Okay. All right. Well, how about if we just pick it up where you tell me how you came to be in the 10th? I understood that you were a paratrooper.
Right. Well, I was down at Toccoa, Georgia, and when I went from when I enlisted in the Army, I went down to Fort Lewis, and then from Fort Lewis, I went to Toccoa, Georgia, and took jump training in Toccoa, Georgia, and that was all static line and tower jumping and basic training all over again. And then from there, I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, and had my jumps, and then then the 10th was, it was only a regiment at that time, I think, that was the 87th Regiment, and they were at Fort Lewis, Washington. I think that's where they were. And so I wanted to go there, but I was too valuable because I was teaching recruits at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. So I tried everything I could to get out of there, but at that time my father, he was a forest ranger and he knew some political people in the Idaho Senate, and a state senator from, a United States senator from Boise and Weiser, Idaho. So through a little political power, I got my transfer out of Fort Jackson, South Carolina. So they put me on a train, and there I went to Chicago and Denver, got into Denver, Colorado, and I asked where Pando, Colorado was, and the MPs at that time wasn't sure, and so they put me up one night in the Cosmopolitan Hotel in Denver. So the next day I went and was transferred to Camp Hale. I'm back on the train and went to Camp Hale. And that was probably the meanest station agent in the whole life at Pando, Colorado. There was only a little house out there named Pando, and so the MPs picked me up, and I went to G Prime, which would later become L Company. And so that was some history from there.
What was it that attracted you about being in the 10th?
Skiing, and I think that's probably interviews with other people. I was interested in skiing because I'd skied all my life, and I wanted to get into which was called the ski troops, we thought. So I wanted to go to the ski troops. And before that, they had a para-ski unit. I'll back off. They had a para-ski unit that I wanted to get into, but that was abandoned, and so then I went on to Camp Hale.
Yeah, the para-ski thing is kind of confounding, isn't it?
Yeah, right. But they were stationed up in Utah, and they made one jump, I guess, and then they abandoned it. So
It just seems awkward.
that's right.
Now, many people needed 3 letters of recommendation, most people. Now, did you somehow circumvent that by transferring in?
Right. Oh, yeah, right. I didn't have the letters of recommendation. I went over the head. The military brass wasn't happy with me, but that was life.
Now, have you ever seen the movie Band of Brothers?
I have the wall right there.
You know,
right.
Huh? Do you have any feeling that that sort of applies to the 10th Mountain?
Yeah, definitely so. Right, definitely. So it's interesting, I still hear from some of the people that were in the 10th Mountain Division within the company. So it's a long time back, but there's still people that we're in contact with. And I think it's the same way with the cadets. So at Dartmouth College, we were taught the same thing that we were taught at the 10th Mountain Division, and a few of them were killed in Vietnam, but that was the same band of people that are still with that program.
How do you explain that strong bond?
I think it's the training we had, and also there's not very many of us. It's an elite unit, the same way as the mountain training centers are in the Army today. It's an elite unit that they continue on with it.
When you think of people in the 10th Mountain, what sort of characteristics do they embody?
That's a good question. I think that, I think we all have the same feeling. And I think we all are on the same track and the same standard of what we want to do. And also, we're all wanting to accomplish the same thing, to be the best. And I think that was also, I learned that probably in the airborne. I'll back up on that because they're an elite unit, and transfer that into the 10th, which at that time was a smaller unit, and we had the same goal that we were going to accomplish. And I think the character of the people they had in there at that time were outstanding. There were so many college grads and people that normally, a lot of them, the early people were all skiers and mountaineers until they started filling up the division, and then they started training them in the same program that we were into when we got there.
How would you feel about seeing if we could turn off the chime on the clock? Or
She said no, we couldn't.
oh, it doesn't.
No, I taught that, to him to do that, and so he brought that out.
What exactly did you? Are you really?
Yeah.
What exactly did you teach them?
Exactly, to be self-efficient and be pride in the work you do. Take pride. I don't care if it takes you 4 days and not 4 minutes. Do the pride to be the best you are and be proud of it. Don't take second-class work. And if you're going to do it, if you're not going to do top-of-the-line work and be proud of the Army or whatever unit you're going to be in or civilian life, but do the best and be proud of what you've accomplished.
Now, when you think of all the things you had to teach recruits, especially at Hale when there were all sorts of people coming in that didn't necessarily have mountain skills, was that the most important thing you could teach them?
Right. I think it was, And then later when you want to get into combat, that's a different thing. But you have to have pride in yourself because you want to be the best. If you don't want to be the best, then don't do it. And whatever you want to do. And I think that I was taught that, and I continued to grow on that theory of it. And you can read all the books, I'll back up on something too. Leadership. First year I was up at Dartmouth College, we had to go down to West Point for a month. The top-ranking NCOs of all the eastern colleges, and I went down there, and this one-star general taught it. And up on the board, as long as that wall up there, leadership. He said, leadership is born in you, and I can only improve on it. And I thought that was, and I always remembered that one thing. It's the same way in the Ranger School. When I went to Ranger School, and it said, same way on the board, this major taught it said, kill or be killed. And I think that's the same way of what you're going to do is the leadership, you can improve on it. And if you don't have it, then maybe you should try and improve on what you have. And I was always was taught that, and I think is a good philosophy.
What are the other things that you taught new recruits at Hale?
To be tough. I think that you have to be tough, and when the going gets tough, I always say the tough gets going. And I think that, the training up there was actually, we used to say the combat was easier than the training at Camp Hale, because we were out there all the time, and I think that I used to tell those kids, they were all the same. Most of us were all the same age, but some of us were in different leadership ability and we were the leaders. And if you want to succeed here or in life down the road, then this is a good place to learn it. And I think that, you can say, well, you got to do this with your boots, and also, you have to be on time. Be on time. Your time and somebody else's time is valuable, and your time is not more valuable. And be on time, and have pride in yourself. Keep your clothes clean. Keep everything clean, and your shoes shine. And this all reflects on how you're going to do in life. And soap and water is very cheap, and keep your hair cut and dress right, dress. And the same way in the morning when they used to fall out for reveille, come stumbling out there. Dress right, dress, and keep out there, be there first. When I had my company and my platoon, when I had a platoon, be out there first. And then that's pride you take in yourself and your fellows next to you on your right and left flank.
Now that pride in the fellow on your left and right flank, how does that translate once you get into combat?
You better have this guy looking out for you on your right flank and the guy on your left flank looking out for you at the same time.
Where did you learn all this?
Well, I learned some of it in the Army, most of it in the Army, and also, self-taught. My dad was a German, real strict individual, and so I learned that a lot of it from him, but I left home at 7 years old. But I think that, I learned it by doing and watching other people and picking somebody that's a leader or something, whether it's civilian life or in the Army, and trying living up to that standard that you admire in somebody.
Want to just pause while the phone?
Oh, well, let the thing ring, care less about the phone.
Wait till it stops ringing.
It's just the
I think it's definitely so. What we learned, and there was some great officers in the 10th Mountain Division that we looked up to, and you can try. Then there was a lot of duds too. There were a lot of duds that came in there on the political end of it. There was a lot of political appointees in that division. I'm sure that's been brought out before, and I think that there was a lot of great leaders. I look back at I look at General Hayes, was a great leader, and I'm sure, and General Hay, and he was, has anybody ever mentioned Colonel Hay? He was probably the youngest major in the 10th Mountain Division. He was my 3rd Battalion commander. He lived up at Ridgeway, and he was a fantastic guy. I used to see him, and I'd try and pattern myself after him when I saw him in the Army. And I can always remember when he came down to Swift, when he came out and took over the 3rd Battalion and that was a sad day when he left. Made Lieutenant Colonel. But if I remember right, he was the youngest major in the 10th Mountain Division at 23 years old, if I recall. But to pattern yourself after that gentleman was fantastic.
What were the things about him that inspired you?
He was good looking, and he was straight, and he was honest, and there was no garbage. When he said something, he meant that, and there was no left or right. And also, he was straight as an arrow and dressed like $1 million all the time. And I used to say to those kids in the company, when we were all kids, I'll say, pattern yourself after Major Hay and later Lieutenant Colonel Hay, and you'll go a long ways in this Army. Did you ever interview him? Oh, he was a fantastic guy.
Missed him.
He was great.
What are the attributes, these sort of can-do attributes that you learned in the 10th that you think not only helped you, but helped others succeed in civilian life?
Well, I think what we learned, excuse me, I think what I learned in the 10th Mountain Division, I saw when we were overseas and also in Italy and back, I wanted to do something when I patterned myself after the 10th Mountain Division. I wanted to do something with the snow and the mountains and to look around into this great outdoors. And I always admire the people that want to be out. And if you were born in the city and wanted to go back there, but I would never want to go back in the same way in my hometown of McCall, Idaho. It's a beautiful place, but it was not big enough for me to do what I wanted to do when I patterned myself, because I wanted to stay in the Army and get out. I was going to stay in for 30 years, but then I had this opportunity to go to Vail with Peter and Parker, and that's what I wanted to do, because I always wanted to build and be out in the open and do things rather than be in the city. And like a lot of people want to go back to Manhattan, they couldn't wait, but not me. I wanted to be outside and take advantage of what there is out here.
Was it as much about what the work was as who you were going to be working with at Vail?
Part of that. That was what I really wanted to do up at Vail. I said before, I volunteered for Vietnam, and they wouldn't let me because too many Purple Hearts, and also they wanted me to keep teaching the ROTC. But then when Vail started, it was 2 years old, and I was offered a job there. I said, aha, this is really what I want to do, because I had been in Europe, and I saw the way they built ski areas, and then in New England, and the toboggan chutes, I call them, narrow, tough trails. I said, aha, this is something I want to do, and this is something I wanted to do all my life after being in the 10th and seeing what I could really do. And Peter and Bob gave me an opportunity to put to work some ideas I had that I saw in Europe in the ski areas, and also back in New England. And so we put that, and at that time they let me do anything that I wanted to do within reason. And I had some ideas, and between the rest of us, we put it all to work. But I always pattern it, and I wouldn't have been able to get there if it hadn't have met Bob Parker and Peter Seibert in the 10th Mountain Division. In the same way with a lot of people that were in this business, ski business today, we come out of the 10th Mountain Division. Not only in the ski areas, but in the manufacturing and the rags, the clothes and the boots and the rest of it. And I look back at Nike and a few of those people, and that if I hadn't been in the 10th Mountain Division, I would have never been there. They wouldn't have given me that opportunity to do that, where if you'd have stayed in the paratroops or the Rangers, what is there really to do when you get out of the Army? And the 10th gave me that opportunity to do what I always wanted to do.
Okay, let's pause for just. Go ahead.
Would you say Peter had the vision?
Oh, Peter had the vision. He had the greatest vision in the world. Peter and I would go out and look at trails, and Peter would say something over here and say something over here. For example, his vision is down at Dillon, down in that area. Peter, when that was at old Highway 6 through there, Peter would say, and even when I-70 went through and there wasn't anything there, Peter said, someday there'll be houses on both sides of this road, and he said there'll be a ski area up there, and Peter had that vision. I don't know where he ever got it, and that's what's happened. There's Breckenridge and Highway I-70 and all those houses, and Dillon and all built up. Dillon used to be, when we went from Camp Hale to Dillon, and that was the police that set out there in their pickup, and that's where they'd get their ticket, their money for pay. With all the GIs at Camp Hale would pool their gas money and their gas stamps and pooled it and get enough gas to go to Denver and back on the weekend. One pass a month out of there.
Did you go to Denver much, or did you spend your weekends?
One pass a month you got out of there, but once in a while I went down to Denver, but most of the time we would go out to ski. But yes, we only got one pass a month out of there, so you'd probably go to Denver.
Did you feel like your training at Hale, I know it was difficult, but did you feel like it was a labor of love? Hold your thought.
Oh, is it anytime, hun?
Well, I know training was hard, but did it seem hard, or did it seem like just something you love to do anyway?
Well, it seemed hard, but it's all up here. You can do you can make it harder on yourself, but if you're in a leadership position, you have to make it good, and keep going. But it was hard. It was good training. It gave you an idea if you thought that was tough, then you take this training here, and then when they start firing at you, then you put this training really to work and see how good your training really was at that time.
Did you feel like that training prepared you for life?
Preparedness for life, that's exactly right. And definitely so. Definitely prepared us for life and I'm sure all the people that were on D series and that training up there all the time, some of the people that couldn't hammer or couldn't take it left and went down and went in the Air Force or some other place. But that prepared you. If you could take that training, what we had up there, day after day, month after month, you could stand anything. Nothing would be tough enough in civilian life.
Do you think it prepared you for death and the horrors that you saw on the battlefield?
Oh, sure, definitely so. I think that I saw a lot of people die, and definitely so. And that prepared you, the lectures you had and what they were telling you, if you wanted to listen to it. But there's nothing that can really prepare you to see some of your best friends die on the battlefield. But if you dwelled on that, then what good are you at leading people down the road?
How did you feel when you saw that happen?
Well, felt very sad, but you have to continue. You can't stay there with them. And I'll back off on something. It's like when we made the Incheon Landing in Korea, the lieutenant we had, his name was John J. Nordling, I'll never forget. He had a nervous breakdown, and they put him out, and then I took over turned that battlefield commission down. But I I was a platoon sergeant in that I&R platoon for the 7th Division, and I looked back on it. I said, the 10th Mountain Division and the training I had there, the leadership that I had, was easy to take over and go on. But you can't let that, if you fold like that second lieutenant or that first lieutenant did, then what good are you leading the people forward? Because somebody's going to die, let's face it. And and the day the same way, when before we went into battle, all the the chaplains, the sky pilots, we used to call them, give you all this lecture, and try and prepare you for that time. But you got to continue on. And if you don't, then you're losing the battle also. That's what the enemy's looking for you to fold.
And during World War II, why was the 10th there?
10th in Italy? Well, I'm sure it was brought out many times. I'm sure that 10th, I'm sure that, it was before, all the books say, and we were told we trained and trained and trained and nobody wanted us. I can always remember, one time when we were, the rumor is we were going to Burma, and I'm sure this was brought out before, and what are we going to Burma for? But then when General Hayes decided that he would take us, and we went on our way, but from Hale down to Camp Swift, and we had one mission, and that was go to Italy, but soon we learned exactly what our mission was when we got there.
Well, when you got to Italy, why don't you talk a little bit about, why you were there and how personally you felt why you were there?
Well, I was glad we were there. I was glad we were there, and I wanted to put together the training we had. We'd worked all those times and years up at Camp Hale and a hard training, and we all thought, are we ever going to be able to put this together and what we were really trained for? And I think that everybody, and I'm sure that everybody around me, we were glad we were there, and we wanted to show the Army and the world what we really could do. And I'm sure that we did. But yes, I was glad I was there, and I knew what we were there for. And soon we learned what we were there for.
Did you have a sense that it was important?
Oh yes, I definitely so. I thought we were important. We were briefed, and we knew what we were there for, and definitely so.
Did you all ever have a sense that Italy was the forgotten front because of all the action?
You're right. It was a forgotten front, and you never read much about it because everything was on the other side, down in France and on the other side, and it was forgotten. Definitely so.
Did it matter to you guys that it was forgotten, or were you happy to do the work?
No, it didn't matter to us. I were happy to be there and happy to do the work that we were sent there for. Definitely so.
When you think about all the hard work that you've done throughout your life, by the time you got to Vail, I know you worked really hard at developing Vail, but did that fall into that same labor of love category where?
Oh yeah, definitely so. Oh yeah, definitely so. That fell right back into it because we wanted to do the best we could. And it was a new ski area, and I used with Peter and Parker and myself, so we want to make this the best ski area because Aspen was over the hill, and we wanted to make this the best ski area in North America. And it became the best because a lot of vision that Peter had and the people before the new regime takes over, and yes, it was definitely so. And the vision that we all had, because it all came back to when we started.
How much of that making something the best it could be is really competing with yourselves, not so much other resorts that were out there, but?
Oh yeah, we were definitely competing. I was competing with myself because, and I wanted to show people that we were going to compete with somebody else, and I wanted to compete with myself to show what I had learned and brought back. I was going to make it better for myself and for somebody else. Definitely, I was competing against myself. That's the reason I worked 70 days a week.
How much of that same spirit do you think transfers back to what you learned in the 10th, that the 10th is sort of competing with themselves as opposed to any outside force?
Well, that's a good question, because I think, well, the 10th, it goes back to the thing that I think the 10th, the people who are in the 10th, a lot of the people transferred out of the infantry was already later on in years, or up at Camp Hale, when a lot of people came in there that were recruits, but a lot of them were transferred in there, and they were competing because I think that we wanted to show we were better than the airborne. We were going to show we were better than any straight leg infantry division there was, and also they all used to come back and say, well, the Marines are the choice of the place. And they said, oh no, we want to be the best. And so we competed, I think, in ourselves, and I did, because we wanted to be better than any unit in the Army. Definitely so. As I come out of the airborne, I knew that they were great, but I knew that we were better because the training we had was really something.
You know, after the war, you had a bond with men who were from the 10th, and you had the commonality that you all loved the outdoors. How much of it was the love for the outdoors that pushed you towards Vail, and how much of it was knowing that you could work with guys of the 10th?
Well, that's a good question also, because I think that definitely so. I know that I could work with the people out of the 10th because we had the same goals in the 10th Mountain Division as we were going to do at Vail when we built that, because we both had this, or all of us had the same idea, and that we were going to build the best ski area in the world. And the same way, going back to the 10th, we wanted the best division in the Army in the service, whether it's any Marines, Air Force, or in the service, definitely so. And I always thought that. In the same way with building Vail, with Bob and Peter, we had our offs and ons, but we were all going for the same goal, to build the best ski area in the world, like we did in the Army, to build the best division.
With the Italian campaign and Vail, did you have a sense at the time that you were making history?
No, I had no idea. Had no idea. No. No, I don't think so. Maybe somebody did, but I had no idea that we'd be making history.
Did you have a sense that you were...
Yeah. Just a second.
Oh, right back in shape.
No,
Okay.
good shape.
Ready to go, hon.
Okay.
Oh, I wanted to try to turn more. This is looking good right here. Okay? Go ahead, Abby.
When you think about the 10th Division during World War II, did you have a sense that you were part of history?
No, I didn't. I have no idea. I don't think that. No, I have no. I don't think we're part of history. I think it was a proud unit, and but to make history, no, I have no idea. I had no idea of it. And I think in later years, until it was started bringing out, then it was going to be part of history. And then I think when they activated the 10th Mountain Division in Drum, I said, well, then maybe it'll be history, and which it is.
What do you think is the place in history for the 10th?
Probably it was the first mountain division that was ever formed in the Army, and I think it was probably the first division that had the goal to fight in Italy, and what the 10th Mountain Division did. I think that was probably, and that'll probably be in history, because in the straight infantry, the Red 1 is probably the oldest division in the Army, but I think that the history of the 10th Division will live on because it was the first mountain division that was ever formed in the Army, and continued on in later years, which as of today in 2004.
Now, can we talk a little bit about what your specific duties were? Let's start at Hale and then I'll move on.
Well, at Camp Hale, when I got there, as I mentioned previously, I had basic training between the ROTC at school, and then my training in Georgia and Fort Jackson, South Carolina, of course. And then when I got up there, I was a skier, so they had the ski training up at Cooper Hill, and so they sent me up there to teach skiing, and that didn't last long, because they started the NCO Academy down at Hale, so they shipped me back there, and had the meanest captain I ever met in the Army, Captain Adams, and he was in charge of the NCO school, and so I was instructing in the NCO school, and so then with the first class out of the school, then I was abandoned, and that first class went out formed out the different companies in the 10th Mountain Division.
Did you prefer instructing NCOs?
No, not really. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to ski, and then I wanted to get out and made corporal, and then when I went down to the company, I had weapons platoon.
You're gonna have me actually talk a little bit about, like, when you're a first sergeant, what it's like to be a first sergeant.
Okay.
Well-
Right? Oh, what's it like to, tell me a little bit about being a first sergeant, what's it like?
Well, Dick Cochran, when I was a weapons platoon sergeant, I was a senior sergeant, and the weapons platoon sergeant was a senior sergeant, and they had and first, second, third, and fourth platoons, and I was a weapons platoon sergeant, and so I was light machine guns and 60 mortars. So then when they moved to Camp Swift, then they formed the weapons companies, and so M Company was formed at the heavy weapons companies, 50 calibers and 80 millimeter mortars, and 81 mortars. And so our first sergeant, Dick Cochran, went to M Company, and so I took over the company as first sergeant, and that was what I wanted to do all the time. And so he was a great sergeant. Dick was a fantastic sergeant, but he wasn't tough enough, and he was too nice.
What's the job of a first sergeant?
Keeping all those troops in the line, all 4 platoons, and also do all the work. I had a company clerk named Harry Stone, who was fantastic, and do all the paperwork and check all the paper. I let him do that, and then we had all the supplies, check all the supplies and keep all the records straight and the mess all clean, and everybody dress and keep clean, and your uniform pressed and drilled and worked all the time. I loved it. I loved running the troops around. It was great for me. And I think in that order that you set an example, and I look back at my training I had, and that set, in leadership to lead the troops, and it was terrific. And also I liked the inspections, to inspect the mess halls and the supplies and all the barracks and all the personal programs of troops, their foot lockers and their shoes and shined, and get them dressed in the morning, fall out on time, and keep everything fit, polished. I loved it. It was
What's
great.
the hardest part about being a first sergeant?
Nobody likes you.
Did it bother you?
No, it didn't bother me a bit. Everybody likes to be popular, but and I think in even civilian life today, you like to be liked. But I like to be liked, and it was good. But I think that when you look back on all this, people don't like discipline. Majority of people don't like to be told what to do. And I think that whether that's in civilian life or today, and I always said everybody has a boss. The generals have a boss upstairs, and the colonels have a boss, and down the line, everybody has a boss. In civilian life, whether you're in a corporation, the stockholders are the boss, but you got the CEO, and it's the same way in the Army. Everybody has a boss, and you can be really popular and not have discipline within the company, and you can be respected. I think probably I was respected in somewhat, but because I tried to set the example, and I learned that in training, and I think that if you learn to set the example, then your life is better with the people you're commanding.
Did you feel like you set a pretty high standard?
I set the highest standards I possibly could. Yes, I set a real high standard, definitely so. And today is the same way. I'm on the board, some boards here, and I set a high standard. And I had to set a high standard for myself, and if I'm going to command something, I expect the people to at least try and do that standard. And I think that breeds a better person in life, and you can continue out in civilian life or in the Army, but you set that standard and let somebody follow it. And as I look back at Major Hay and Colonel Hay, I said always looked at that example he set for the troops. And what I did it today in civilian life as I did up at Vail, and same way at Dartmouth in the ROTC, and I was teaching mountaineering up there. The cadets up there I set a standard for them, and I expected them to follow it. And I look back in that training I had in the 10th Mountain Division, as I back up at Dartmouth College, which is in the records I have, when we went down to summer camp, usually Dartmouth College were in the bottom of the rung in the eastern schools. After 2 years, Dartmouth led every year top school in the eastern, in the First Army. They were the top of the school. Those cadets that I had there, it was all a volunteer program, but the cadets that were in the mountaineering program they set the example for the rest of the Corps, and they were trying to find that out. The cadets that under me, when they went to Devens, they had better discipline than the regular Army troops at Fort Devens down in. And so they could, when they left there, when they went down to Fort Devens, they knew how to fire. I set up a rifle range. I didn't know mortars, but I set up a rifle range and rock climbing areas out there. And also, we went out on a bivouac. I had the same equipment we had in the 10th Mountain Division, and the Akios and the tents and all the rest of it. And those cadets, when they went to Dartmouth or down to Devens, they knew they were so far ahead of everybody else. And in turn of that, the Corps, the whole Dartmouth Corps, was a better Corps because they watched the cadets who were in the mountaineering program. And that came back to the 10th Mountain Division. I learned that, and how to use all their equipment and how to teach that, and for those kids to set the example.
Did it ever occur to you the way that Lieutenant Colonel Hay inspired you, perhaps you inspired everybody behind you?
Oh, I think so. I think so, definitely so. Because I really respected him, and I think that's true.
But did you ever have that same sense that you inspired other people in that same way?
Yes, I do. Oh, definitely so. Oh, yeah, definitely so. And I think even today I have it up at the ski area. I'm on the board up here. I brought people in there, and they're following some of the example, but I learned that. I was taught that and put myself a little farther above that, definitely so.
How did you set the bar high in the 10th?
Well, I had a certain way I did. I wanted the best company in the regiment. I wanted that best company in the regiment. So I set that bar and told them every day, we want the best company in the regiment. And in the battalion. We have to be best company in the battalion because we have to do better. And each individual, I can't do it, each individual has to do better so we can be the best company in the battalion, and then we can be the best company in the regiment. And we have to set that bar up there, and if you don't, then we're just another company within the battalion or regiment.
So what happened when you set the bar high?
People used to say, Sarge, why do we have to do this? The other people are not going to have to do it. I said, someday you'll be glad that you did this.
And the result of setting the bar high was?
We accomplished the goal we were headed for. Definitely. So we always were, most of the time we had that ribbon, the best company on the guide thing. You know, every company had the best, you know, you had a ribbon that went on the guide out there, the guide in the platoon. And we had that ribbon most of the time. And so they were happy about that.
A lot of pride in that?
A lot of pride in that, too.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, what are the challenges of turning a group of really talented outdoors people into spit and polish Army, 10th Mountain guys?
Well, you know, when they came up there, everybody was an individual. Let's face it, they were all individuals. Not all of them, but a lot of the people that came in there were all individuals. And I used to tell them, you're probably the best skier in your school, or you're probably the best rock climber up here, but that's an individual sport when you're doing it by yourself. Now, it's not an individual sport. You have, whether you're in a platoon or whether you're in the company, you have somebody else that you're going to have to teach. Maybe you can teach this kid that doesn't know how a lot better, to be a lot better than he is with your help. And if you don't do that, you can't, then you're not a good team player if you don't, you know, help somebody else out to be a better skier and a better climber. And some of them were in ROTC, and then they left and went on to OCS. But then you can teach them what you have learned, and it'll be easier for them and also for everybody else in the company. And that was a tough deal because there were so many individuals in that company, or in that division, were great rock climbers and great skiers, but you had to mold that same group of people into being a team to help one another. And I think that was a tough deal once in a while. And maybe that was brought out of some other people, but there were so many individuals in that division that when they came in there that, I'll take John Litchfield for instance. You know, he was a fantastic skier on the Olympic team and everything else. You talk about an individual. You know, he was really an individual. But he was in a position where he didn't do that. But there's a lot of kids, you know, like Ben Duke. You know, he was a great one, and he was a fantastic skier. Man, Ben helped a lot of people. Ben was a great guy.
What are the qualities that make somebody like Ben Duke great?
Well, where he came from and his position he had in civilian life, and he never let that bother him at all. He was just another soldier in the Army, and then of course he was up. They rode up to being a platoon sergeant. But Ben could have gone on, but he wanted to stay in the company. But I looked at Ben now and the job he had before he got in the Army, and there was a lot of people just like him, and that could have said, "Well, we don't want to do this. We'll do something else." But Ben was down there grubbing with the rest of us. He was a great guy.
Why do you think people wanted to do that?
Do what?
Why do you think people wanted to do that, stay down there grubbing with the rest of you?
Well, I think they wanted to be a part of the organization. Definitely. So they wanted to be a part of the organization. But they were an elite outfit. There was another mountain division in the Army like that. There were lots of infantry division, but not in the mountain division. And that was one of the things that they wanted to do.
So some pretty exceptional people stayed in and worked at a lower level.
That's right. To stay in the outfit, definitely so.
Do you think there was a sense of people wanting to mentor people behind them that you might not normally see?
Oh yeah, definitely so. You know, because being experienced in the other part of the Army, and then I see the people who was in the 10th that would help other people all the time, whether it was on the end of a rope or skiing, or even in KP in the Army, in the kitchen, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, going in there, and they would help even one another there all the time. and if somebody couldn't make it, they would jump in and take their place on it. Definitely so.
Is that a tribute to their individual, qualities, or is it something that the 10th sort of brought out of people?
No, maybe both, but I think that's the reason probably the 10th was what it made us today is such a great outfit. Those individuals brought it and put that on to each individual, and they molded into them. And I think those qualities those people brought in there helped the rest of them to be what they were today.
What if you talk a little bit more about how enlisted soldiers challenged the officers and how the officers challenged the enlisted soldiers?
You don't want to put that on tape. No, it was good. No, that's right. The officers, the thing of it is, it was used to sort of gripe all the people. It didn't bother me any. I could have cared less. But some second lieutenant would come in the company, and he was right out of OCS, and maybe he went to ROTC, and he come out of the ROTC, and then he went to Fort Benning. I don't know how long. I think they go down there for 6 months maybe. I don't know. Some school, maybe at Fort Leavenworth. I forgot where they come from. They came from all over. Would come in the company, and they couldn't ski. They couldn't rock climb. They knew some drill. A lot of them didn't want to be there, and so then the troops were smart enough to find those guys out, and so it was a little tough for those second lieutenants to be in the company. But the guys that really molded into there were the people the lieutenants, the officers that came into the company, like the captains and the company commanders. They found out that maybe we're not so bad after all. But it was some of those people came in there, it was a tough deal for those officers to come in here. Maybe they came out of Straight Leg someplace, they were transferred in there and didn't want to be there because they needed officers. And the troops are smart enough to know how they were and what they were going to do. But some of them molded in very well. And the NCOs, that was always a challenge to everybody because, it's interesting, a lot of the NCOs didn't want to go any higher than what they were in the company. And some of them could have gone to OCS because there would be flyers come down, if you want to go to OCS, you go to OCS, or so on and so forth. And a lot of people never wanted to do that. They wanted to stay within the Army and also as an enlisted man in the Army, in the 10th Mountain Division. So I thought that was funny because a lot of them didn't go.
Well, they had a good reason to stay, didn't they?
Oh yeah, definitely. So they were doing what they wanted to do. They were outside, they were skiing, they were climbing, they were doing a lot of things that they wanted to do. Otherwise, they'd probably left.
Did you ever wonder, especially during the length of the training, because it went on for so long, did you ever start to wonder if you would ever be sent into battle?
Oh yeah, we always thought that. We'd go out for a month at a time and say, well, now maybe we're going to leave here. Maybe we're going to go someplace. And we'd come back in, and then, of course, the rumors would all fly. And every time we went out on one of those training missions, we'd come back and say, no, nothing happened. So we'd all come back in, and then the summertime, summer would roll around, we'd run our cop and robbers programs and do the rock climbing, and same thing we did all the time and getting more proficient on it. And so finally we didn't think we'd ever go. We thought, well, we're going to stay in the States forever.
Was that frustrating?
Frustrating. Oh yeah, frustrating all the time, I'm sure. Maybe that was brought out by the other people, but we all got frustrated all the time because there was so much repetition of the training we did. How much can you do all the time? You can run, how many times can you go on the firing range? How many times can you shoot mortars? How many times can you do BAR training? How many times can you put up fixed ropes? How many times can you rappel off the cliff? How many times can you take wounded down? And so on and so forth. But but pretty soon you could do it with your eyes shut.
Well, especially because everybody seemed to be very quick learners.
Oh yeah,
And
definitely.
so maybe, I know the Army is geared towards lots of repetition. How do you think the fact that everybody, or many people, very quick studies on this affected the amount of training they needed or didn't need?
Well, I think after a while it got to the point, how much training do you really going to use? The thought was all the time, are we going to use all this? We fired all the M1s all the time. We did all the BAR training and the mortars, fired the mortars, and you went and through all the obstacle courses, through the mud and the barbed wire and the machine guns flying, firing over your head, and taking the mules out and the great mules and packing them up and going out training, set up the kitchens off of the mules, and then every time the mules would stampede, that was a really great thing because you could say we lost all this, we lost all that, and so we could get all new again. So that was always that we had those mules. They were more trouble than all the troops. But they practiced that all the time. Well, maybe they brought that out, we had to go out all the time. The company would go out and take the mules out with all the kitchens and all the ammos and all the rest of them, and set up bivouacs, set up kitchens, do all this, and pack up all the mules, bring them back, start all over again the next day.
Did you ever think that in your outdoor life, the repertoire of skills you'd need that would include all the mules would ever come in handy?
No, the mules are a disaster. I was glad when we got rid of them. They were horrible things. But, that was interesting too. When we left Camp Hale, took all the mules down to Camp Swift. And, when they started to unload the mules, they started running all over the place. Probably the mules are still some of those forms out there. We got mules out there. We had the artillery observation planes out. We were out rounding up mules all over, out at by Camp Swift, out of Bastrop, Texas. Out running around mules.
Whoever would have thought.
Oh, it's awful down there. It's hot.
Well, before we move on to the Italian campaign, do you want to talk about anything else about the Hale training? Any particular maneuvers, something that a real strong memory?
Only of course everybody brings out a D series all the time. But the D series was tough. But D series was same thing you did every day. You went out, but you went out. The only thing you were out longer. I'm sure everybody griped about the fact that when they come in off of D series and all these problems, they wouldn't let you go in the barracks. You bivouacked out on the parade ground, so wouldn't let you go in the barracks. So that was it. But it's the same. It was the training up there was the same old thing all the time. After a while, and of course you went up on D slopes and you trained there and went on and the skiing, and then you'd have competition. But it was one of the things that try and keep everybody occupied. That was the thing.
When you finally got over to Italy, what was your feeling about being there?
Oh, I thought it was great, terrific, new territory, see new things, going to do something new. We're doing something we were trained for. But we didn't know how long it would be, but then we soon found out it wasn't very long.
Did you have a real sense of purpose, a real sense of being useful?
Yeah, when we got there, then we started training again, that was a little training program again. And
did that worry you, that suddenly you were back to training?
Well, not much. The only thing we did, we got rid of the mules. That was great. The Italians took the mules, so that was great. And
what did all the mule skinners do then, if the Italians took the mules?
Well, we had a few of them, but they took, the artillery mules were all taken because we had the Fifth Army had the artillery supporting us.
So did a mule person just become a rifleman then?
Right, went down with the rest of us, that's all. That was better anyway.
Well, how about if you talk a little bit about first major action?
Okay, you know what, we're almost at the end of this tape. How about if we